All right. Thank you all for coming. How many of you have ever owned a car and it's one that you just hold on to rather than trading in for a newer model, and you own it maybe, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 years, and then things start to go wrong? Anybody have this experience, right? Things start to go wrong. They're not made to drive forever, and neither are our bodies, unfortunately. So, what I'm going to talk about today is a little bit about longevity. And the truth is, none of us are going to live forever. We are all eventually going to come to the end of this, one short, sweet life that we have. The work that I do with my patients is helping them optimize so that we can lengthen our health span. That is, the number of years that we are robust and healthy and able to do the things we love, engage in the things that we want to do, have a meaningful existence, and shorten that span that unfortunately is all too long. If you look around at how aging happens, you don't have to look very far to see that we're often not doing it very well in this country. And statistically, women are going to spend longer in that period of disease and ill health before our death than men do. And it's an interesting statistic. Um, Men do tend to die of um, things like cancers and massive heart attacks more often than women. So, perhaps that's actually a grace to them. Like they just go out with a bang. And often we see that women will tend to linger in a disease state, needing long-term care and assistance with our daily activities. So, I'm Rachel Smith. I am a doctorally prepared, double board certified nurse practitioner, and I own a practice just down the road off State Road 70 called Aspect Wellness. Um, the work that I do with my patients is really just around that cardiometabolic and hormonal adjustments that we can make to optimize our health for the long term. So, I'm going to give you today 5 areas of focus, and some of them I'm going to just really skim over because Dr. Anita touched a lot on kind of the emotional aspect of our wellness. And of course, Monica is going to talk in depth as she's our expert on the physical aspect. But you'll notice, even in the areas that I do discuss, that there's a lot of overlap. And that's the beauty of it, really. When we take a comprehensive approach to our health, everything everything is interlinked. And so I'm going to go through 5 things that we can focus on to really optimize our longevity for the long term. And we we started having this discussion about this collaborative event, talking about thriving through menopause. But the truth is, menopause is really just this one stage of life that women go through where maybe for the first time we feel our mortality. We have that really obvious change in really our ovarian capacity to produce estrogen, and suddenly we realize, wow, I'm getting old. Like what's happening? What does this mean for me? But menopause is just this one little marker in our lives as women, and yet we've got years, decades for most of us, decades that we have to live and thrive. And so that's what we're really talking about: is how are we going to make the most of these years, and how can we optimize in these decades of our life to have the most robust health. So we're going to talk first about muscle. And I'm going to not spend too much time here because this is Monica's area, but from a cardiometabolic perspective, muscle strongly correlates with our longevity. So people who enter their 5th decade and beyond carrying more muscle mass on their bodies will tend to have lower incidence of all the chronic diseases that we develop in the US. So lower incidence of cancers, diabetes, and heart disease. And that correlates with muscle. So how do we support muscle? Well, there's two obvious things, and then a third that's not so obvious. And this is where we get some overlap. The first one is we have to use the muscle. Muscle requires resistance. So that is primarily strength training. And that's where, for women, I think many of us came of age in an era where that was not something we did. In fact, a lot of my patients still tell me, I don't really like to sweat. And so we have to talk about that, right? It's not just the sweating, but it's we've got to use our bodies. And we've all heard the phrase, use it or lose it. And the truth is, I mean, that is true not just about our muscle. It's so many parts of our body and aspects of our body. We have to use them or we will lose some of the agility. So muscle is preserved through movement and lots of different types of movement, strength training, as well as agility training, squat training, the high knees, flexibility, balance, all of that comes down to muscle. The more core muscle you have, the better balance you have, which means less likelihood of fall. The other fascinating thing about muscle is that it tracks hand in hand with bone health. The more muscle you have, the stronger your bones are. And there's almost nothing that is more devastating for me as a practitioner than to see my patients develop osteoporosis and how debilitating that can be. So if you know someone, that you're close to that has osteoporosis, you've seen this, and it can sometimes progress so rapidly, and the deterioration and quality of life impact is so great. So muscle isn't just about, can you pick up your grandchild or carry a bag of groceries into the house, but it's also how strong are your bones and how likely are you to fall or sustain an injury if you fall. So the movement is part of it, but the nutrition is the other piece of that that's obvious. You've got to fuel your muscle to maintain or grow muscle. And many, many women who come into my practice come in initially to talk about weight loss. Because what do we do if we're women? We diet. I don't know. Most of my patients have been dieting for most of their life. And it doesn't matter what their weight is, they're usually on a diet of some sort, um, which in many ways is heartbreaking. We are intelligent, creative, very capable beings, and we spend so much energy in our lifetimes just fussing about that number on the scale. So that's, a lot of the work I do is help my patients, just put that aside. We're going to focus on the health aspect and we're going to check that off our list. But nutritionally, if you've been dieting your whole life, often what we see is a lot of metabolic slowdown. So women who are maybe only eating 900 or 1100 calories a day, which I don't know whether you track calories or not, but if you're a woman, you probably do. That's a really low number. And yet they're worried about their weight. So they're not losing, sometimes they're gaining even on 1100 calories a day. So muscle equals metabolism. The more muscle you have, usually the stronger and more robust your metabolism. The more muscle you have, the more cheesecake you can eat, right? Like, how beautiful is that? I think it's a good thing. Okay. So um, we will talk more about muscle, but the third thing that is kind of the not so talked about element about maintaining muscle is estrogen. So for those of you who are in a phase of life where you're still a candidate for discussing whether estrogen might be something that would help you, estrogen is growth promoting in our bodies. So when we have estrogen, it is much easier for us to grow and maintain muscle. And when estrogen drops dramatically, when our ovaries shut off at menopause, suddenly women start to lose muscle and the rate of decline is rapid. So we see muscle loss at like 2 or 3% sometimes per year of your total muscle. So this can really rapidly become a slower metabolism, which is why so many women start to see some weight gain around the menopausal transition. So estrogen is not a cure for low muscle mass or slow metabolism or weight gain, but it can be part of the preventative package that we put together. That's muscle. Um, the second one is metabolism. And you can see I've already mentioned the word metabolism a couple times. There's so much overlap here. But when we're talking about aging healthfully, we have to talk about metabolism. How many of you would say, I have a really fast metabolism? Anybody here? I have a really fast metabolism? I, I know almost no women who would say that. I know a few men, and they're usually in their 20s, and they're trying to bulk up, right? And they can't. They're eating everything in sight, and they're scrawny, and they're trying to grow muscles. They have a fast metabolism. But most people would say they have kind of a slow metabolism. We sort of feel that. It goes hand in hand with the fact that we've probably been dieting and underfeeding, undernourishing ourselves for most of our lives. So if we want to talk about a healthy metabolism, what we're talking about is a metabolism that is based on that muscle that we have grown or preserved. Because when you think about muscle, I want you to think about the fact that it is what moves your body. It is the engine that moves your body. If I take a step, or even if I'm just standing here, everything is being held up by these large muscle groups in my core, right? Every tiny muscle up my spine and in my neck is helping me hold my body upright. So the more muscle you have, the more calories your body requires just to stay alive. The more muscle you have, the more calories you burn even when you're asleep. So, and I use this language specifically when I'm talking to women because I know it resonates with us because we've been dieting our whole lives. And so we kind of like that idea that we're burning calories even when we're asleep. But the truth is, that's also the mark of a healthy metabolism. And if you have a healthy metabolism and you do not have a great deal of excess visceral fat, fat in and around your organs, peripheral fat is okay. Like peripheral fat is what gives us our booty and insulates us and protects us if we fall. Okay? Peripheral fat is good. Peripheral fat makes some women look voluptuous and some really athletic women look not so voluptuous, right? I mean, different body types. But peripheral fat is not the unhealthy fat. It's the visceral fat that is unhealthy metabolically. Okay, so when we're talking about metabolism, the more muscle we have, the less likely we are to develop visceral fat, the less likely we are to develop diabetes as we age. The less likely we are to develop diabetes means less likelihood of cancers and heart disease, because those three are like the three musketeers. They hang together: diabetes, cancer, heart disease. And what have they named Alzheimer's? Type 3 diabetes. Okay, so we can really say it's a little team of four. These are the things we're trying to avoid. And it really does come down to, real basic stuff like how much muscle do you carry into your later years? Okay, so we're going to move on from metabolism to talk about hormones briefly. How many of, we don't have to ask this, you're either premenopausal, that is, you are still having monthly cycles, or you are postmenopausal. You have stopped having monthly cycles. Okay, it's this line in the sand, right? And it's marked by the date of your very last period. That's how we mark it in healthcare. But the years leading up to that very last period are very tumultuous for many women, not for everyone. So when we talk about the menopausal transition, 15% of women will skate through and they have their last period and they're like, thank you, Jesus. I put that behind me. I don't have to deal with that anymore. And, let's just move on with life. 15% of women are absolute dumpster fires during the menopausal transition. They feel like they've been hit by a truck. They hurt, they have brain fog, they're developing high blood pressure and high cholesterol. Their moods are all over the place. They have dry skin, they're losing their hair, they're being diagnosed with frozen shoulder and osteoarthritis and like all of the, this long laundry list, because the truth is we have hormone receptors in every cell in our body. And when we suddenly have zero estrogen and our progesterone levels drop too, our sleep is affected, our mood, our cognitive function, our joints, everything in our body is affected. So when I'm talking to women about whether or not they want to replace hormones We talk about what do they think they know about it. And there's a lot of fear out there around hormone replacement therapy and cancer. That's a very individualized discussion, but most of those fears are based on a very flawed study that came out in 2002. So if you have questions about that, ask me about it later. The truth is, estrogen does not cause cancer. It never has. It does not. So if that is a fear, I will tell you, it's become embedded in our culture. Most women believe it to be true and maybe even have heard it from their doctor. But estrogen does not cause cancer. So we can talk more about that. Hormones, when they decline rapidly, we feel it. We feel it. And there are options for replacing it to help us kind of push back some of those things. The truth is, there's nothing about hormone replacement therapy that's going to make you live forever. And you're not going to look 30 because you're on hormone replacement therapy when you're 60 or 70, but it can help push back. It can help kick the can down the road, is how we say it in medicine. So that, if you are replacing those hormones, maybe you're not going to have the joint deterioration. We know lower risk of osteoporosis. If you are feeling more on top of your game, if your mood is more stable, maybe you're having more social interaction, maybe you're more motivated to get to the gym, there's lots of trickle down positive effects from that. So again, we can talk more about that because it needs to be a really individualized discussion. So we talked about muscle, we talked about metabolism, we talked about hormones. The fourth thing is recovery. So we hit 40 and most women are peak of career, may or may not have children who are middle school to college or, going through lots of life transitions, and aging parents. And now we've got hormones that are wreaking havoc in our body. So lots going on during this era, and it doesn't stop, right? Like we get to 50 and now we've got kids in college and parents that maybe are looking at long-term care and decisions we have to make around that, and lots to balance. Stress tends to be really, really high. And if your health is not optimized during this time, those stressors have much more of an impact. And so, a big part of the conversations I have with my patients are how do we give our body downtime? What does that look like? What is stress management? And it has to come down to sleep. We have to learn how to sleep. And there are tools for that. I wear an Aura ring. How many of you wear some type of a sleep tracker device? It's a great tool for learning what your body needs to optimize sleep. There's other tools. Um, we have to talk about, like, are we overusing alcohol for stress management? And we live in Florida. Of course we're overusing alcohol, right? That's just culturally endemic, right? So it's a conversation that needs to happen. And listen, I don't ask my patients to give up their wine or their Thursday afternoon cocktails with the girls, but we have to look at how it's impacting our overall health, our weight, our metabolism, our cognitive decline, and our sleep. And then we have to, when we're talking about recovery, we're talking about, what does our social network look like, right? Because if we're going to age optimally, we need those social connections. This is probably one of the reasons that women live longer lives than men, because we tend to have more girlfriends. We tend to have kind of a circle of people. We've got, that surround us and they have our back, right? We can call them and they're there for us. They're going to bring us coffee. They're going to help out when we're sick, or they're going to help out with, whatever major drama is going on in our life. And men don't tend to have that. Super important. So these social connections are a big part of our long-term health. And again, as a nurse practitioner who helps my patients take a comprehensive look at their health, these are discussions we have. The final one is purpose. And purpose is a really interesting discussion when my patients reach retirement, because we know what our purpose is when we get up every morning and we go to work. We know exactly what our purpose is. We know what our purpose is when we have kids at home. We know exactly what we're up to. We're trying to get them out of the house, by 18, alive still, and, ready to go play an important role in the world. But when the kids are gone and we're retired, suddenly that that purpose is a little wobbly and we may need to find our true north again. So, it's interesting because when I'm working with my patients who are gearing up for retirement, it's super exciting and you feel this sense of like the world's going to open up for you and you're going to have all of this time to do whatever you want. And what I see is very frequently I've got new patients coming to me and they've been retired for 2 or 3 years and they're like, I've gained all this weight. I don't really do anything. My sleep is so disrupted. I sleep till 11. I'm up till 2. They don't have a schedule. They don't know what they're up to anymore. And so, purpose, having a purpose driven life, whether you have a job to go to or not, is super important. And in all of the longevity studies, this is one that tends to rise to the top, that we need to know what we're up to each day. So I think um, that's a pretty important one as well. So we talked about muscle, metabolism, hormones, recovery, and purpose. And this is the work that I do with my patients at Aspect Wellness. Thank you for listening. Does anybody have questions? No.
I was going to ask you,
Yes.
what is the average age now of menopause?
52.
So 52.
Yeah.
So usually 52 is when the cycles.
That's typically the final period at 52, but perimenopause can start as early as 12 years prior to that. So 40 for some women, if they're going to enter menopause at 47, they're in perimenopause by 38. Yeah. Yeah, so it can be pretty disruptive at a time of life when you really don't need that. You really don't have time for that. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.